You think you have time. That's the first illusion. The lie that wraps itself in routines, calendars, and plans for someday. The voice that says, there's always later. Later to start, later to leave, later to become who you were meant to be. But time is never generous. It doesn't announce when it's running out. It just does, quietly, while you scroll, while you comply, while you settle. Most people don't realize they've wasted their life until it's no longer theirs to reclaim. Nietzsche warned us, the masses don't live, they sleep. They exist inside systems, beliefs, and comforts that keep them numb. And when they finally wake up, it's not with clarity, it's with regret. What if the truths that could have changed everything only become clear when it's already too late? What if the most important lessons in life aren't taught, but punished into us? We're told that wisdom comes with age, but age doesn't bring wisdom. It brings consequences. Consequences for the things we ignored. The love we didn't express, the risks we didn't take, the selves we buried to fit in, be liked, or stay safe. So today we're going to do what most people avoid. We're going to look directly into the 13 truths people learn too late in life. Each one a crack in the illusion. Each one a whisper from the future, echoing back to this moment right now, before you run out of time. You don't have to wait for loss to understand value. You don't have to wait for collapse to begin questioning. You don't have to wait for the end to finally start living. But first, you have to wake up. They told you to aim high, to dream big, to be exceptional. But they never told you the view from the top can be unbearably lonely. But stop for a second and ask yourself, how many of these truths are you already avoiding? How much of your life is built on what's safe, not what's true? You don't have to answer out loud, but be honest. Because the rest of this video isn't just information, it's a mirror. Stay with me, because what comes next might explain why your life feels stuck, and how to finally wake up before it's too late. When you rise, truly rise, not just in status, but in awareness, something begins to happen. You start to see things others don't. You question what others accept. You step out of the line, and suddenly you're no longer one of them. Nietzsche called this the path of the higher man, the individual who refuses to be shaped by the herd, who doesn't just follow the rules but interrogates the rules themselves. And for that, he is misunderstood, resisted, and often exiled. You grow, and the world around you shrinks. The jokes don't land anymore. The conversations feel hollow. The small talk becomes unbearable. You're not better than them. You've just changed. You've evolved. And evolution always comes at a cost. This is the part no one talks about. The solitude of awareness. The grief of outgrowing what once felt like home. You carry the burden of seeing more, of understanding deeper, and sometimes of watching the people you love stay behind. Not because they can't come with you, but because they don't want to. It's not arrogance. It's not superiority. It's the silence that follows clarity. So yes, greatness is beautiful, but it is also isolating. And the higher you climb, the more you must learn to live with the echo of your own thoughts. Because not everyone is meant to walk with you to the summit, and some peaks you face alone. It doesn't ask for permission, it just takes. And yet most people act as if it will always be there, as if life is an unlimited trial run with infinite retrees. So they give away their best hours to distraction, to scrolling, to performing for strangers on screens. They trade presence for productivity, silence for noise, meaning for momentum. We delay what matters for what's urgent. We wait to live after the job is done, after the weekend, after we feel ready. But readiness never comes, and the moments we ignored become the regrets we carry. Nietzsche posed a terrifying thought experiment: eternal recurrence. Imagine living this exact life over and over again for eternity. Every thought, every decision, every wasted day. Would you be proud to repeat it, or would you shatter under the weight of everything you neglected? The truth is, most people would not choose to relive their lives. Not because their lives were tragic, but because they were empty, safe, number delayed. And that is the tragedy. We talk about time like it's money, but money can be earned back. Time is the only currency you can spend once, and it's spent whether you're conscious of it or not. So the question isn't how much time you have. It's what you're doing with the time that's already slipping through your fingers. Because one day you'll wish you started sooner, and by then, sooner will be gone. Most people don't want the truth. They want comfort wrapped in familiarity, a version of reality that doesn't threaten what they've built their identity on. And if that means believing a lie, so be it. Because lies offer security. Truth demands disruption. Nietzsche warned us about the herd mentality, the instinct of the masses to follow, to obey, to cling to what's popular even when it's hollow. Not out of malice, but out of fear. The fear of standing alone, the fear of thinking too deeply, the fear of confronting what they already suspect but aren't ready to accept. And when someone does tell the truth, when they dare to challenge the illusion, they're not celebrated. They're punished, laughed at, silenced, cast out. Because the truth doesn't liberate you at first, it isolates you. It makes you a mirror people aren't ready to look into, a voice that reminds them of what they're avoiding. You become the threat, not because you are dangerous, but because what you say makes them feel exposed. So society doesn't kill the truth directly. It smothers it in distraction, drowns it in noise, labels it inconvenient, dramatic, conspiratorial. And eventually the truth teller learns something hard. It's not enough to be right. You also have to be willing to be alone. Because truth costs connection before it brings clarity. It burns everything that isn't real. And in that fire, you either find your voice or you lose it trying to be heard. You wake up, you scroll, you respond, you perform. And just like that, another day vanishes. Most people treat time like an app they can keep reopening. Like there will always be more of it, more chances, more tomorrows. So they waste their best hours, chasing validation from people who don't know them, clinging to routines that drain them, fearing change more than they fear regret. They give their energy to distractions disguised as obligations. They stay in rooms that make them smaller, with people who don't ask them to grow. And in doing so, they quietly trade their life away, not in one grand decision, but in thousands of tiny, forgettable moments. Nietzsche offered a haunting idea, eternal recurrence. The notion that you could be doomed to live the same life over and over again, forever. Every decision, every hesitation, every wasted opportunity. Would you say yes to that? Would you willingly live today, eternally? Most wouldn't, because when faced with that question, they realize they've been living passively, surviving instead of shaping, drifting instead of deciding. And that's the real tragedy. Not that life ends, but that so many never actually begin. We wait for the perfect moment, for permission, for clarity. But time doesn't wait. It just moves, indifferent to your indecision. And by the time the urgency kicks in, it's often too late. You can't recycle time. You can only reckon with what you did with it. So ask yourself now, before you run out of chances, would you live this day again? And if not, why are you still living it now? From the moment you learn to speak, you're taught how to be liked. Smile politely, don't be too loud, don't be too quiet, blend in, fit in, be agreeable, be liked. At first it feels harmless, natural even. Who doesn't want to be accepted? But over time, the desire to be liked becomes something else, something quieter, more dangerous. It becomes a form of sedation, a numbing agent that lulls the soul to sleep. You start to edit yourself, round out the sharp edges, withhold the truth, mirror the crowd. And slowly, piece by piece, you trade who you are for who they'll approve of. Nietzsche warned us of this slow erosion. He called it a spiritual death. The moment you stop living by your own values and start performing for the expectations of the herd. And here's the paradox. The more you try to be liked by everyone, the less anyone truly sees you. Because real connection doesn't come from agreement. It comes from honesty, from being known, not just for what you show, but for what you carry beneath the surface. To be universally liked is to become invisible. The question isn't, do they like you? It's, do they know you? And more importantly, do you still know yourself? Pain isn't the problem. It's the signal. It's the body's way of saying, something isn't right. But instead of listening, we reach for distractions. We numb it with entertainment. We drown it in noise. We run from it, labeling it weakness, failure, or disorder. But Nietzsche saw it differently. To him, suffering wasn't a flaw to be fixed. It was a threshold to be crossed. Pain was the first awakening, the crack in the illusion, the moment the mask starts to slip and something real begins to emerge. Because pain doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend. It points to the places you've abandoned, the truths you've buried, the needs you've silenced. It reveals the life you've settled for and dares you to demand more. In a world obsessed with comfort, pain is rebellion. It's the soul refusing sedation. It's the moment your system says, no more pretending, no more numbness, no more lies. So maybe the goal isn't to get rid of the pain. Maybe the goal is to finally hear what it's trying to tell you. Pain is not your curse, it's your compass. And it's pointing toward the version of you that's ready to wake up 7. Your greatest battle has never been with the world. It's been with the voice inside your head, the one that tells you you're behind, that you're not good enough, that everyone else is doing better, that your past defines you, that your mistakes are who you are, that your value depends on who notices you. But that voice isn't truth, it's repetition, echoes from childhood, culture, and conditioning, stories planted by others, now disguised as your own. Nietzsche understood this deeply. To him, the true battlefield wasn't external, it was internal. The task wasn't to conquer others, but to conquer the self. Because until you master your mind, you're a prisoner in your own life. When the mind goes unchecked, it loops, in guilt, in shame, in endless comparison. You replay the same regrets. You imagine futures that never come. You rehearse conversations that never happen. And somewhere in that mental noise, you lose presence. But when you become conscious of your own patterns, when you step outside the loop, you stop reacting and start choosing. Your mind stops being your enemy and becomes your instrument. You realize that your suffering wasn't coming from reality. It was coming from your interpretation of it. You're not too late. You're not too broken. You're not being judged by anyone that truly matters. You're just stuck inside a story that you never agreed to write. And the moment you change the narrative, the world begins to change with you. Most people don't die when their heart stops. They die long before that, when they stop truly living. They die in meetings they hate but keep attending, in relationships they've outgrown but won't leave, in cities that suffocate them, wearing smiles that aren't real. Not because they want to, but because they're afraid. Afraid of being judged, afraid of failing, afraid of not being liked. So they trade boldness for approval, depth for safety, dreams for duties. Nietzsche called this the great tragedy of modern man, the half-life, not quite dead but never fully alive. A state where comfort becomes a cage, where silence is mistaken for peace, and where obedience is rewarded with mediocrity. We're told to play it safe, to be realistic, to keep our heads down, but safe doesn't mean fulfilled. And realistic often just means fearful in a more socially acceptable way. So we shrink, we wait, we hope someone else will give us permission. But here's the truth no one tells you. No one's coming to free you. No one's coming to pull you out of the life you've settled into. And if you don't risk being seen, you will always remain invisible, even to yourself. Fear is subtle. It doesn't scream. It whispers, not now, maybe later. Who do you think you are? But one day you'll run out of later, and the life you wanted will belong to someone braver. We call it love, but is it? So often what we think is love is really something else. An ache, a void, a desperate reaching. Not for the other person, but for what we hope they'll make us feel. Worthy, wanted enough. Modern relationships have become mirrors for our unhealed wounds. We don't seek connection, we seek validation. And when that validation disappears, so do we. Nietzsche believed that true love is impossible without strength, without autonomy, without a self that stands whole, before offering itself to another. But most people don't enter love with strength. They enter with need. And where there is need, there is always control, possession, dependence. We confuse lust for chemistry, longing for fate, the butterflies in our stomach, often just anxiety wrapped in attraction. Not this person completes me, but I don't feel whole without them. And that is not love. That is addiction. You cannot truly love someone when you're trying to use them as a cure. Until you feel enough on your own, you will only love from a place of hunger. And love, when fed by hunger, eventually consumes the very thing it clings to. You want real love? Then first, learn to be full, because love is not the answer to emptiness. It's what's possible when you've already filled the silence within yourself. There is a quiet comfort in the crowd. It offers protection, belonging, the illusion of certainty. When everyone around you agrees, it's easy to believe you're right, even if nothing feels truly real. Even if something deep inside you whispers that something is off. Nietzsche warned against this kind of comfort. To him, conformity was not safety. It was decay. Not because the crowd is always wrong, but because it almost never thinks. Popular opinion doesn't require depth. It requires obedience. And over time, that obedience erodes the self. Your opinions soften, your voice dulls. You stop asking questions, not because you have answers, but because you've learned it's easier not to ask. But truth is rarely where the crowd gathers. It lives in the friction, in the discomfort, in the refusal to nod along when your soul is screaming no. Insight demands resistance. It requires you to stand apart, to be misunderstood, questioned, even rejected. Because following the crowd may preserve your reputation, but it often costs you your soul. So when the crowd moves one way, pause. Not to be different for the sake of rebellion, but to ask the question the crowd stopped asking. Is this true or just accepted? Because there's a difference, and it's everything. The past doesn't disappear, it lingers. Not just in memory, but in behavior, in reactions, in patterns you swore you'd never repeat. Trauma has a way of becoming architecture. It builds the walls you live behind, even long after the storm is over. And for many, the past becomes a prison, a loop. You relive the betrayal, the abandonment, the shame. Not because you want to, but because no one ever taught you how to do anything else with it. Nietzsche offered something radical. He called it amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not tolerance, not survival, but love. To embrace everything that has happened to you, not despite the pain, but because of what the pain made possible. To love your fate is to stop wishing things had gone differently, to stop waiting for closure, to stop blaming a past you cannot rewrite, and start using it. Because pain, when unprocessed, controls you. But pain, when alchemized, becomes fuel. It sharpens your perception. It expands your empathy. It hardens your resolve. The question is no longer, why did this happen to me? The question becomes, what will I build from it? You are not what hurt you. You are what you decide to do with the wound. Discipline has become an unpopular word. It's mistaken for control, for coldness, for the denial of pleasure. We associate it with harsh routines, with sacrifice, with limitation. But discipline isn't suppression, it's alignment. Not about denying yourself joy, but about choosing which joy matters most. Nietzsche saw discipline differently. To him, it was the birthplace of the Übermensch, the higher self, a being not controlled by fleeting impulse, but guided by a deeper purpose. Not reactive, but intentional. Because in a world that feeds on your attention, your energy, your weakness, discipline is rebellion. a refusal to be owned by the algorithm, a quiet act of power in a culture addicted to convenience. Discipline says, I will not let the world decide who I become. I will not confuse dopamine for destiny. I will not trade what I truly want for what I want right now. Every time you choose presence over distraction, growth over comfort, commitment over chaos, you're not just improving, you're evolving. The modern world calls it boring. Nietzsche would call it heroic, because the path to becoming more than what you were yesterday is paved with 1,000 quiet moments where you chose what mattered instead of what was easy. Authenticity sounds beautiful until you live it, until you realize that speaking your truth often means standing alone, that showing up fully without filters or masks doesn't always invite applause. Sometimes it invites silence, sometimes rejection. Nietzsche knew this well. During his lifetime, he was dismissed, mocked, ignored. His ideas were too strange, too sharp, too uncomfortable for a world still clinging to comfort. He died alone, his brilliance unrecognized. And only years later was his work hailed as genius. This is the paradox of truth. The deeper it runs, the fewer people can follow. Because truth doesn't flatter, it doesn't conform, it doesn't entertain. It disrupts, it demands, it strips everything false until only what is real remains. And that's where the loneliness comes in. To be authentic is to risk everything that was built on pretending. But here's what most don't see. Loneliness is not the enemy. It's the filter. It's what shows you who's meant to walk beside you and who was only ever drawn to your mask. So speak the truth, even if your voice shakes, even if no one claps, even if the room goes silent, because your soul is not here to be liked. It's here to be seen. There's one truth we all carry, but few are willing to face. You will die, not someday in the abstract, not as a distant concept, but for real. A time will come when your name will be spoken for the last time, when your last unread message stays unread, when the world moves on and you're no longer in it. Most people call this thought morbid, but Nietzsche didn't. He saw death as a mirror, a question that hangs over every moment, every decision. If your time is limited, then how are you spending it? Death, when truly faced, doesn't paralyze you. It frees you. It strips away the trivial, the pretending, the performance. It makes your fears feel small, your ego feel laughable, your time feel precious. Because the truth is, most people aren't afraid of dying. They're afraid of never having truly lived, afraid of getting to the end and realizing they said yes too often, stayed quiet too long, chose comfort too many times, afraid of realizing they became who the world wanted without ever becoming who they really are. So ask yourself now, before the clock runs out, what are you still postponing? What truth are you still afraid to speak? What version of you is still waiting for permission? You don't need more time. You need more truth, and you need to act on it. Because in the end, it won't matter who doubted you, misunderstood you, or left you. What will matter is whether you had the courage to become yourself before time ran out. The world doesn't reward authenticity. It rewards obedience, imitation, masks. It rewards the version of you that fits, not the one that questions, the one that entertains, not the one that thinks, the one that plays along, even when everything inside you screams for something real. But if you've made it this far, then maybe something deeper inside you is stirring, a voice you've ignored, a truth you've buried, a life you've postponed. You've heard the warnings, you've felt the silence, you've touched the edge of loneliness that comes with walking your own path. But that's where life begins, not in the comfort of belonging, but in the fire of becoming. Not in the echo of the crowd, but in the quiet certainty of your own voice. Not in being liked, but in being real. So don't go back to sleep. Don't retreat into noise. Don't forget what woke you. Because even if the world never claps for your truth, your soul will. If this awakens something in you, something you weren't ready to admit but can no longer ignore, like the video, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who's ready to remember who they are. Most people learn these truths when it's too late to live them, but you don't have to. You can wake up now, before time, comfort, or fear steals who you were meant to become. Don't let Nietzsche's warning be your regret. Let it be your reminder. Like this if a part of you felt exposed. Subscribe if you're ready to live the truths most people never will. And share this with someone who's still asleep before their life becomes a lesson too late.